And I'm just going to double check on Twitter, of course. All right. Looks like we're back for Proof of Beauty podcast, episode number 21. Today we're just going to be hanging out. It's happy hour vibes. It's Friday. We hope everybody had a great week. We sure did. We're going to kick off the conversation talking a little bit about, I guess, how the front face to crypto Twitter has a new owner. And so Elon Musk is now, technically in control of the domain that most people use as the front face of their business for this industry. Even, funny enough, like I know there's even habits where people will check Twitter for the official links to certain platforms, right? And so, it's kind of interesting to see that it's been privatized. It's in one man's domain.
Or
what are your
reprivatized,
thoughts?
right?
Reprivatized, yes.
I think it's an interesting time for social media companies now.
Yeah.
Any kind of social platforms, it just feels like with even the what do you call it, the most poster child of them all of that era, Facebook, and kind of struggling a bit.
What up?
So, and they're struggling.
Mhm.
Reddit's not public,
Mm.
right? Reddit's not public.
No, I don't believe so.
Um,
Wasn't there discussion about that at one point? I could be completely off, but I remember maybe speculation about that. I kind of want to look it up just because this is
I
ringing a
don't
bell.
know. Are they revenue focused in the same way that like a company like Facebook is? I don't know.
Reddit. Well, I knew they had controversy with
Mhm.
like their CEOs and stuff,
Mhm.
where they had to switch out a few of them, trying to find their
Well,
direction.
they remained private. I guess at one point, maybe 2021, it seems there was some speculation that they were planning to release an IPO. Clearly, that never materialized, and that was probably the right call in the market that we're experiencing, right? Seeing tech get completely obliterated, it would be pretty awful if they entered the market and then saw an 80% decline. Obviously, the nice thing is when you're private, you can keep a lot of those metrics and user data to yourself, and you're not necessarily held liable directly to public shareholders, right? So, but yeah, I'd actually think that Reddit would be a pretty awesome company to invest in if they were on the market.
Yeah, I've always had the weird impression they were public, but then I was like, no, if they were, then I think I would have heard more controversy around the securities price.
That's right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just like it just feels like we're in like a area where it gets where I think like just collectively the social media space feels like it's kind of just been in a rut, and I think that if Musk desires to kind of change the system, inject some new ideas, I think a lot of us would be welcome to kind of seeing somebody kind of tear shit up a little bit and see where things can be. So like, yeah, I think it's also weird that I think if you think about it, for a lot of NFT businesses, their survivability is now going to be hinged on Musk on the Twitter side.
That's
And
exactly it. Yeah.
Dan Finzer on the OpenSea side.
Right.
And if either of them makes a decision that isn't good for your business, good luck, have fun, right? But then you could say the same about maybe an influencer working on Mark Zuckerberg's kind of platforms, right? So,
there's
it's weird to reconcile with. It's really weird,
right?
But
it's kind of bringing a few different things to mind, like talking about the state of tech a little bit. Like obviously, and this is just a little off topic, and we can get into this in a bit here because I'd love to hear what you have to add to the Elon situation, Ash. But I've been thinking a bit about, Snapchat situation, for example, and even wider, like, the use case of some of these applications. But anyway, and, just in thinking, I guess, about what Elon's talking about for Twitter, making it more like a global town square. creating a product that has, I guess, like a more decentralized component than it does today. So I don't know, like there's like a little bit of a change happening. I think that we're seeing tech kind of fall, but at the same time, you look at Snapchat, for example, and there's still a high number of daily active users. And we know that in most markets, stock price doesn't always correlate to the actual development happening with the product, right? Or the product life cycle itself.
Has
Um,
has Musk commented on like ad placement and revenue? Is there going to be
he
material
actually,
changes?
yeah, he released a post on his Twitter. It was like, "Dear advertisers," and it was like 4 little paragraphs about his intentions for advertising. And basically, it seems that he still has a great advertising intent for the platform, which would be great. I think, though, his focus on advertising seems to be more about creating a bespoke advertising experience. He mentioned something along the lines of, when advertising is done correctly, it can make us more aware of great products and actually bring joy to the experience of being advertised to, right? And I'm paraphrasing here, but I think that's more in alignment with his philosophy. Um, what are
Hmm.
your thoughts on this whole Elon thing, Ash?
So is it something new that he's saying that's like quite stark from what was previously talked about, or not really?
Nothing in particular. I think the thing is just seeing this materialize. Like, I don't think many people were actually aware how quickly. I mean, like when you look at the news cycle, it looked like this was never going to materialize, right? And then out of nowhere, this October, it's wrapping up. I don't think a
What,
lot
like
of people are
the
aware of that
sale,
potential. Yeah,
like the
exactly.
Twitter
Like,
sale? Yeah.
yep, like the previous CEO, COO, and a couple of their executives have already left the company. I believe Elon has made himself the CEO of Twitter. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe advisors have already seen a wire transfer of payment for, their 54.20 or whatever it was for the stock price. So the deal is very much underway, done even maybe. But basically, it's just interesting to think about how this has an immediate implication for the people who work on that platform. And it reminds me of when Facebook made a change to their algorithm, and overnight, like tens of thousands of companies that had Facebook company pages went out of business essentially because the algorithm no longer worked favorably for their company. There was drastic declines in revenues. Um, so I just think about those kind of scenarios, right? Of course, and think about how Elon, if he would like to, can have an immediate change that could immediately impact the business.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just like, looking at social media overall. It's like, what are like the major players? It's like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat's like not even really relevant anymore, and Reddit and Twitter. And Facebook and Twitter share the same, and I guess that Snapchat share the same qualities of like non-searchability. Like they're not really.
Hmm.
I think Twitter's the most like that. Yeah, like nothing's really happening on Facebook anymore because it tried to do everything, and so it kind of
Right.
failed at everything except marketplace, which is kind of hilarious. But in the long run, and so the whole coolness aspect of software is interesting because Twitter, how did it manage to survive all this time and be still so relevant in every
Hmm.
aspect? Instagram is not as surprising that it survived because it's literally photographs
Hmm.
in similar manner to it's a more optimized version of Facebook, basically, right? It has the same like properties, like you can visit
Like
someone's
modern
profile.
Facebook,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Hmm.
I think
yeah,
old Facebook there was a lot more text content.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
They
And
changed to video, very video heavy for a little while there, and kind of mellowed out.
yeah,
Anyways, yeah.
and Reddit's all about knowledge base, basically. Like that's the way I see
Hmm.
Reddit. It's like it's supremely optimized for searchability and
Yeah.
like discoverability from just anything, like Overflow
Right.
almost for like for society. Right? That's like the good way to
Yeah.
even put it, right?
Somebody even put it as
Yeah.
like it's the front page of the internet. If you wanted to like have a
I
front
mean,
page, you
yeah,
know?
that's what they call themselves. Yeah, that's what they call themselves.
Yeah.
And then like looking at the qualities of Twitter is interesting because it's much more stream-like, ephemeral. Like
Hmm.
you can't really search Ethereum TX as just a hash, right? And so it's almost
Mm.
like that, like a stream of constant data. Everyone is having a different experience. It's super weird, but somehow we're making it work, and it's still like the
Mhm.
number one way people communicate. I think
Mm.
the combination of Jack and Dorsey, or Jack and Elon's involvement in the product now is going to and especially because of crypto Twitter is now. I think it's pretty much like certain that in 5 years we're gonna see some like real strong integration with crypto to some degree. And I
Mhm.
think
Well, there,
the way that's gonna happen is not the way that I think most people think is gonna happen.
Didn't they
Yeah.
like just yesterday
yeah.
enable an NFT? Yeah, you can buy an NFT now within a Twitter feed. So it's a very seamless process. And so like on day one, there's some action, which may have been intentional. I kind of wanted to poke at something you brought up though about Snap. I decided to look up Snap's daily active users, and I think you guys will also find this very surprising. Like, check this out, guys. So like, yeah, we're seeing
Increasing.
a massive decline, right, of Snapchat stock price from like, you guys can help me out if on this, but I think it was like something like 13 billion to 120 billion back down to 13 billion, something like that, right? And obviously we have a difference in currencies as well. So, but
Mm.
um, we're seeing here the company continues to grow. And this actually kind of like brings up a couple things to me. I start questioning if we're making too many assumptions, and like maybe Snapchat has a more clear outlined gameplay than we realize. And one thing that comes to mind, for example, is the metaverse. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. We have a lot of people making assumptions of what the metaverse is right now. You have Meta making this gigantic gamble on what the metaverse is and seeing basically little to no response, and it's impacting their business widely. You have a similar thing happening in our actual Decentraland like metaverses, right? We talked about that on a pod, 38 active users in Decentraland, according to DappRadar. But maybe they're making the wrong assumption. And maybe the metaverse instead includes all these different tools and components that we use every day, like FaceTime, messaging components, Snapchat, different ways of virtually communicating. These are all tools and components of that metaverse. And when you look at Snapchat, and they're actively growing, maybe they're positioning themselves better than we realize for the future if we were to look at it with that in mind. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think
Well,
the AR thing is possible. Go ahead, David.
Mhm.
I don't think anybody quite have the right definition of what the metaversal
No.
narrative should be, like the thesis. I think it's kind of like in the 70s when you're trying to like make concept art for what the 2010s would look like.
Sure.
It just kind of feels like you're grafting today's thought and extrapolating with it, which
Mm.
I feel that especially that now we're kind of seeing like the upper bound of the reach and the power of tech companies, and we're seeing like the EU actually fairly aggressively regulate them and their capacity to impact
Mm.
daily lives. I think whatever
Right.
this rendition of the digital meat space experience that we will call metaversal in some way, I feel that even I feel like any of these businesses
Yeah.
it's hard to I would not be hedging these bigger bets on like what you think it is versus
Of course not.
kind of letting it manifest and working on like core metrics that gives you hard value versus like speculating against a vision
Ye-
that is like
Yes.
extrapolation,
I
right?
kind of have a vision of what it could be, maybe, but it's along the same lines as what David said. Like, who really knows, right? Now, like with Snapchat
Mhm.
specifically, they do have something good going for them, which is like the AR thing. Maybe
Yep.
that turns into like actually cool things, like when people start like really experimenting with it. They've had it for a
Mhm.
while.
Well,
And also, go ahead.
just want to ask, do you guys use Snapchat right now? I've never used it personally.
No.
Like I'm never been an active user of it.
I
Yeah.
haven't used social outside of Bitwizard stuff for 5 years.
Okay.
So I also wonder, it's like how much of the Snapchat traffic is like parasitic from only. I know I always talk about fucking OnlyFans, but like how much of it is parasitic from OnlyFans? We don't have to like hammer in on that point, but
Yeah.
Do
you
do you
know, I
mean
don't really
like
know.
what context do you mean like you want to
So
elaborate on that? Yeah.
yeah, so Snapchat was like what people used before OnlyFans, basically as like a modern version to capture
Oh, okay.
viewership,
Yeah.
like a charge per user viewership
Mhm.
outside of Patreon or and stuff like that. That way,
they didn't have like a tipping function or anything built in though, right? It was like,
no, it's
It
all
was just
it's
their
all
self-destruct media thing, right? That's what
yeah.
they cared
oh
about.
really?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all they care about, right? It's the same way that you would have an Instagram private account and only add
Yeah.
certain people to it. The problem with Instagram is that it's much easier to get flagged. So people were using a tool like Snapchat, where it's much more of
Mm,
a dark forest of accounts, and who you're sending data to is also more obscured. Um, so so I do wonder how much of that the traffic is of that nature.
mhm.
The second thing is like what my take on this metaverse, the way it would develop is not really it's not going to be like you can't approach it from like the final form, which is I think everyone's thinking
Of
of
course not.
Ready Player
Right.
One. I don't think that's what's happening. I think we're starting to see inklings of it. Like Twitter, it's a component of the metaverse. Twitter itself is a component of the
Exactly.
metaverse,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
like possibly
So
like
I just want to play devil's advocate here.
yeah
Is the metaverse just the internet as
yeah it
we
sounds like
stand today?
I think
It's like
it's an
the layers on
evolution.
the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, so what basically the kind of point I was getting to is like what like people are starting to talk about like Twitter. What if Twitter used a sorting algorithm that was a protocol on chain, verifiable, whatever, all that stuff, right? It's like as as applications take these steps to use like more protocolized things. And I just listened to the talk from DevCon about Snarks and their whole like concept of programmable cryptography and whatnot and
Hmm.
what the future could look like with those types of technologies. It sounds pretty interesting that like because the way they described it in the talk was like in the future it's not gonna you're not gonna really think about it as like a crypto product or a crypto company. It's gonna
No.
be like HTTPS. It's like we're
Hmm.
gonna be using these things in the back end. It's like there's gonna be communication between like you can verify like who's providing commits on GitHub and like on chain and
Mm.
stuff like that, or like on Twitter it's like fully connected and I think that's really the upgrade I'm seeing. And then once you get to that
So
point, like the cross communication of products in a way that's unlike what we're seeing right now, you know?
so can I ask,
I agree with that.
is the metaverse within the word metaverse a definition like is it defined by having open internet standards? Like is that a necessitate? Is that a necessity for a metaverse?
Mm.
Maybe the core concept again is back to like identity. And I know people always talk about like, oh, shared identity and all this stuff, like metaverse this, metaverse that. But like
Yeah.
actual shared identity would be when products start talking to each other, not some company spinning up a wallet solution or this identity solution or this identity solution, right? True network identity would be established when there's like a somewhat a correlation between all the different like companies and products and the interaction with the public and user
Do you
base.
mean like
That's super
network?
vague. That's super vague,
Okay.
but
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like going in a circle because this has always been my position. It's
yeah,
like
Hmm.
how much of today is already the metaverse,
it's it's getting
and
there.
how much, well, like what are we missing such that we're not the metaverse in people's eyes, right?
Maybe it's a
Like
continuum. It's like a fully continuing. Like it's not a one. It's not like a Decentraland. Like I don't think
No.
it makes sense to think of a metaverse as like, oh, we're trying to make Ready Player One or a Decentraland
right.
or whatever. I think it has to be a higher level concept than that. Even like if you were to think about
Right.
the internet, how would you explain the internet to someone to fully capture?
Connectivity. I don't know.
I
But
don't even
would
Yeah. What do you mean, like in
like
beginning?
would calling
no.
it
So like
a
someone,
metaverse be better?
I don't know, maybe.
Like
Yeah.
I'm just like I never
Yeah.
bought into that hype. Like I just never I looked at the word metaverse was like,
Yeah, I
What
never cared
I
that
feel
much
like,
about the word. Yeah.
are we like voxelizing 2D
I mean, it's a
interfaces?
really
Is that the whole narrative here? Like, right.
voxelize it all. But wouldn't the metaverse be just like another romanticized term here, right? Like the
Like the term
actual,
that gets you money, the term gets you venture
yeah,
cap,
like
gets you hype.
at the end of the day, like what people envision in the metaverse is just like a little bit more personalized than what they experience when they're having a FaceTime call. Do you know what I mean? Like you want like what we're doing now, but you want like a bit more presence. You want like a bit more, like that's kind of what they envision when they think the Ready Player One metaverse, right? But if we're talking about the capability, like the experience of being able to have a conversation with somebody's already there, the experience of being able to relay emotions and ideas is very well developed, and there's even like AR
There's
and
right,
right.
and there's already a lot of people whose their entire livelihood is dependent on their output to these metaversal constructs, right? Like
Right,
Twitch
right.
streamers, YouTubers, right? Like,
Hmm.
there's an argument to be said about
Hmm.
folks like us who makes NFTs, right?
Hmm.
Uh, like it has a economic component as well, or to an extent.
Right, right.
Obviously, like I feel like for at least crypto, metaversal sounds like it's almost like let's do the internet again, but we control it kind of a narrative, where it's like, oh, we have tokens governing, not just a
Mm.
random dude who calls himself a CEO or whatever. But
That's definitely part of it, right?
but I
Sorry
feel
if I
like power,
interrupted your thought.
I feel
Yeah,
like power narratives, power still, like, even with tokens, they still kind of congregate and
right.
aggregate. So
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the
yeah,
whole extremist. Okay, so most of this like metaverse talk probably happens on Ethereum because it's the most happening network. And a lot of Ethereum is kind of riddled with the decentralized everything bug, right?
yeah.
Um, there's not a lot of room for a hybrid future in the mind of the average ETH maxi, right? And
But like, isn't it
um,
open source project like the metaverse? Like that's the original metaverse, to be honest, right? Like any
I
open
think there
source
will,
project.
yeah, there will be open source worlds, I'm sure, but I'm sure that the components and the tools that are used in these worlds will be privatized features maintained in, or
Well, we're
maybe
already
not always, but yeah.
Is
seeing some of this
is
gardening, right?
Hmm.
Consider like modern NFT marketplaces, right? We
Hmm.
for the love of God, we don't actually have like standards, because there's a pretty good financial incentive to proprietary, like to make your own proprietary variants. Even though they all kind of pitched this whole like we're going to become the global NFT standard, they're all fighting against each other, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Even with like 721 flares, right? Like it. Thank God we all decided to standardize around 721.
For real.
Um,
Yeah.
but implementation details are different, right? There's a lot of flavors of 721, right?
Right.
And flavors of metadata served with 721. Like it. Shit, where was I going with this? I completely forgot. um, but yeah, I just don't like. I never bought into the whole like we're gonna like a metaverse. A good metaverse has standards.
Right.
Has like interfacing standards. I think it, a romantic version of me, I would love it. And I think
Hmm.
I think crypto is probably the best shot we got. Right, we have already standardized a good number of stuff,
Hmm.
but then there's going to be some stuff that I think, like for example, the marketplaces that we're struggling to standardize correctly.
Hmm.
Uh, I wonder if the social graph layer, like being able to put your identity and your social output to be standardized, like there's like those projects like Lens Protocol by
Hmm.
the OV group. Lens Protocol is trying to do whatever like that.
Hmm.
Um, but then again, I think it's like if you standardize social constructs into some kind of like standard, I find that to be inversal to like people will try to find new ways to create social networks that have new novel ways to produce social output. And if
Hmm.
those don't confine to your standards, they may even force a new standard out. And then at some point, it's like, at what point does it matter that there is a standard when, like some constructs just don't work in our current view, and it could be kind of not innovative to
Hmm.
force I sometimes find like just being stuck within the 721 construct to be stifling. Um,
Right.
at times. 1155 included, but then that's a necessity of our work to have to be in that area, right?
Hmm.
So like if you create a novel social media that just doesn't follow Lens protocol, would you follow it? Just would you like force your idea into their box, or would
Hmm.
you create your own box and hope that Lens protocol adopts your box? that you created for your own media type, right? Or your social output from your community, right? Like it,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've genuinely no clue where I was going with this. I kind of went on and I literally lost the context of why I said this.
I have something a little off topic I want to bring up. Just something that I'm curious, I guess, more about what your guys' individual stances are on Binance and like the Binance Smart Chain, the whole BNB ecosystem. I know that a lot of the early ETH community, 2020s, 2019, Binance had like a real horrid reputation amongst us. And over the last few years, there's been like a massive adoption of Binance-based products across all fronts in different nations. Even having funny situations where like, past what was it? Like Gary Gensler went and worked as like the CEO of Binance US for a month or something like that before resigning. Like, Binance has like an interesting history that's being developed, and even have news coming out like they're an equity investor in Twitter now. And they just seem to be everywhere. CZ's got a pretty big name out there.
I kind of mapped them into like, this is the Amazon of crypto. Like, I don't
Okay.
agree with how they do things, but goddamn, they're good at doing the things they're doing, right?
Right.
And the BSC chain, it is very vibrant for what is
Mhm.
effectively controlled by Binance. It is, I think, by
Yeah.
very barely any definitions, a actual L2, but it has a lot of TVL. It has
Mhm.
some pretty wild DeFi things there.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
in such a
because they
competitive place, they did it, right?
they mine their own
Mhm.
chain, they can also make it MEV resistant to some degree. I don't know. Depends, right?
And then
Yeah.
they also have a separate chain for their dollar, right? And they've been actually basically siphoning USDC into what is it? BSC?
BUSD.
Yeah, BUSD.
Yeah.
And anyways, yeah, as you were saying, there's some interesting things there, and they do it well, but it's hard to agree with the I don't know, with the approach sometimes.
But to that point, it's like, I'm not here to complain about the
No.
principles of why you did it, but you did it well. Like
Mm.
I see that, and like, and I see that, and I look at Coinbase. I'm like, what the heck did you guys screw up in the bull market, where you let Binance into all of these domains, and you put up little to zero fight. And I think in part maybe it's like, maybe Ashley could comment more on this, but I just feel like Coinbase was a little bit more hampered, like philosophically. They weren't willing to do some of the things that I think Binance would do. Would they're more willing to cross that line?
That
Because
makes
I
a lot
mean,
of sense.
Coinbase is a U.S. company, and the founder comes from normal. He was a dude from Airbnb, right? Vice president or something like that. Brian Armstrong. For a long time, they were scared to even make a non-custodial wallet. That's why it was called Toshi in the beginning and not Coinbase Wallet. And they completely didn't. When they launched Toshi, they made sure that it had almost no connection to Coinbase. It's really interesting the way they did that. And then the question is why? Is it why? Like they knew BitPay started the same time. BitPay had a wallet, so it's not like there wasn't precedent for a U.S. company managing a wallet, right? But it's just interesting mindset, right? They're focusing on what they do best, and it was only until 2021 where they made a full pivot from institutional focus, because that's what they were gunning for from day one. It's like get to institutional grade, to the Web3 and the DeFi thing, and that's like all of a sudden flip.
But
Right.
What do you say is a little late?
It felt late when they did it.
At least late for this bull market. I mean, I don't, again, there's probably another bull market in the future, but
well, institutional in their case was really, really smart. They basically gave themselves a foothold into the future of institutional investing. Like they became a placeholder name in the United States. Now, if institutional investors want to invest, are going to go to Coinbase, as they have been. To tap into the retail markets the way they did, though, was a little weird. To like go put out a decentralized wallet controlled by Coinbase, and to start doing some of the things they did that made it so that somebody like myself could go use their products. It still had an institutional element to it. It didn't feel like a Web3 product yet. It felt like I was using a stockbroker.
Yeah, I mean, from their perspective, they're thinking on like a very large time horizon of like, okay, This crypto thing is new. Back in 2013, where it started, and ultimately for any financial market, they need like like deep derivative liquidity. That's like the only way to stabilize the asset, and then
Hmm.
basically figure out how do we bridge all the cool stuff that's happening on chain with decentralized stuff that they're not so like they have only started tapping into DeFi liquidity, right? That's not even that's a thing to work on for 2023. It's like a bunch of CeFi and
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I guess like from your guys' perspectives, do you guys see a big, I guess, divergence in strategy between, say, a Binance and a Coinbase? Like, obviously, um, they're in completely different markets and kind of held back by different regulatory situations, their environments. But do you guys see any crossover in their approach, or do you guys see them in your minds entirely separate?
I think it's a bit contingent on the customer base,
Hmm.
and their risk parameters that they're willing to partake in. I feel like, if your biggest clients are institutional, and then your retail customers are United States citizens,
Hmm.
you just have a very risk averse community to offer products to. And if you do something wrong,
Right.
you got a political system that can breathe down your neck if it's politically advantageous to do so.
Right.
Uh, Now, when you are serving the Asian market, where they don't nearly have as amazing access to Western style securities,
Hmm. Hmm.
bonds, or even institutional access to good products, and like say if you're like a citizen, like back in when Binance had more access to China's markets, like as a Chinese citizen, you really don't have a lot of places you can park your money beyond like real estate.
Right.
So like
Right.
crypto, relatively speaking, you're like it's not as risky as YOLOing it into like a random stock and on a public Chinese
Right.
exchange. It's almost just as bad or just as worse or just as good, whatever you want to like qualify it to be. So I
Hmm.
think they've always felt like they're more willing to kind of go onto a BNB chain and chase 100% plus yields
Hmm.
versus uh I think other versus like the states where I think Coinbase wasn't willing to do it, but that didn't mean like businesses weren't willing to exist to serve that kind of risky business, like Celsius, Voyager, right? They were YOLOing
Right.
out 10% dollar-based yield on the promise that Luna or Terra doesn't blow up, right? So there's still a
Mm.
lot of risk-worthy individuals in the states, but like I think that is like we're talking like minnows compared to the amount of sharks out there. I think in the Asian markets where they
Right.
are where I think that's where like BNB could thrive in, right? Like they themselves are pretty, like people are bringing money. Why don't we give them what they want? Kind of a
Right.
motive.
Right.
So yeah, I have a hard time faulting BNB for what they do. I think they're
Yeah.
born out of the constructs of their environment. I think whichever business that could adapt that kind of mentality that BNB has, I think
Yep.
whatever that name of that company is would have survived in that environment because that environment wanted that kind of business to give them products, right?
Right. That's a good insight. Yeah.
So
Do you guys use Binance products?
I don't use Binance US. I used to have a Binance account.
Hmm.
I think I have like a BNB
Yeah.
address. Like I have some BNB sitting somewhere on BS.
So I think I
When I
saw
was
like
testing Matcha.
some news article on my phone, FTX, Sam Friedman talking about like wanting Coinbase or something like that. I
Wanting
don't
what?
know,
Sorry.
like to acquire Coinbase. I don't know if
Oh,
that's true or
interesting.
not.
That's a
I don't know if
ballsy
that's true or
move.
not.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
the analogy you
yeah.
made with Binance being like Amazon, it makes a lot of sense actually. Like when I think about it
Hmm.
too, it's like just a level of scrappiness to get every single tip and like basically everything
Hmm.
that can exist. FTX, to be honest, like I don't realistically see them having dominant. It only not in the public, at least in the public recognition. They have extremely deep liquidity and survive just off that, and that will make sense. I think.
Hmm.
Um, but I think Coinbase will have to reach like Apple like status for them to survive because they're in a tough they're in a tough situation right now. It's like if they cannot figure out how to merge the CeFi and DeFi worlds and
Hmm.
continue to draw people into their application specifically, pretty much fucked like AOL or like MSN or Yahoo. You know,
Interesting. Yeah.
What
they
do
have to
you?
solve that. Yeah.
What do you? I mean, if people don't actually care about actually owning the asset and just only care about like spot display, like spot exposure,
Sure.
like right, like Cash App, like even PayPal, like there's a lot of like what do you call those like retail
Yeah.
apps that are
Entry,
right that I would say are like to an extent doing what I think maybe the lowest hanging fruit retail customers want to do. Like I
Right.
don't think maybe somebody who's like really cares if they actually own the Bitcoin. They want to have
yeah,
exposure to its success. And
yeah,
if they think PayPal can give that to them, then who cares if they actually custody the
yeah.
asset or
Hmm.
Coinbase custodies
But
it, right?
I think we're beyond the problem of like getting on people opportunity crypto. I think it's like
Well, I always felt like that was a big
no,
arm of
yeah,
Coinbase's
no,
like lifeblood. Like a bit of it was like people like just dollar
yeah,
cost average
yeah,
purchasing
yeah,
and
yeah, no,
paying exorbitant fees.
100%.
Right.
100%, but
Um,
like that's not, they can't survive off that long term. You need to
But
figure out like how to keep
right.
people in the ecosystem,
right.
meaning they need unique novelty of feature sets and integrate across all the
Right.
different, and they're setting them. It's just a matter of like actually like making those large connect dots and then it working.
Right. I I'm really curious, guys. Like, something you said just got me thinking a little bit about how, like, right now we don't really have a regulatory environment where there's like a dominant exchange for, say, governments to buy these kind of securities because they haven't even been classified as securities yet. But uh, like,
Wait,
imagine
wait, what are you referring to?
I'm just thinking
Being
about
purchased?
an organization like Coinbase and how they could set themselves up to be the de facto organization that acts as an exchange that sells governments and large government like organizations securities or whatever it is they classify their
I mean,
assets as.
Well, like you're
yeah,
saying securities as in like Bitcoin being a
Like,
security?
or
yeah, yeah, yeah,
or
because
anything, right?
that's exactly what would have to happen to deal in that regulatory environment, unless well, actually you could
So,
sell
Are you
commodities
saying
too,
like
but
they're
you
gonna
understand.
securitize it?
Well,
Because
I don't know,
I
of
think
course.
right
I don't
now the
really know.
CFTC has defined it as
Yeah.
commodities now. I think
I don't
they
really know how it works. Like, will they use companies like
Yeah,
Circle that are highly specialized in that one particular thing, or are they going to use something like Prime Broker? I don't know how good. Like Coinbase's Prime
right,
Broker product should be the best Prime Broker, from my understanding. But at the end of the
right.
day, you can always do dark pool deals, right? Like David. So
so wait, I'm trying to think of this one through. So if I were a central bank
Yep.
and I want to diversify my balances and
Yep.
hold crypto assets, would I use Coinbase as a counterparty to trade against, or are they custodying my assets? Because if they are custodying my
Right.
assets, I think that's like a different
I mean, they're probably
That
going
is
to
a
use it.
different thing.
Yeah, intermediary. Like I don't know who the government actually works with. If it's like a big bank like
Right.
Goldman, but Goldman would have a Prime
But if
Broker
you're, but
account
what
that
if
would have
you're a
custody,
central
right?
Yeah.
bank,
I'm
right?
thinking more in the context to what if Coinbase could play like a market maker role with the government in supplying those kind of assets. Like, you have FTX, Coinbase, you don't have too many other
Yeah,
institutional organizations that deal in this world that
Well,
are so
I have
large,
a
right?
hard time the Federal Reserve
does
dealing
Coinbase market
directly.
make?
Yeah,
Maybe not right.
I think they
yeah.
contract companies to market make on their order books. I don't know if they do they actually
Mm,
have their own trading desks.
I think
I
so
don't.
for sure.
I could
Like
be.
from
I mean, like
I don't
my
know.
there's a
memory,
comp.
from
Do
my
they have
memory, I
their
don't.
own like system that they're making money market making on their own order books? I
From
genuinely wouldn't be surprised either way. So
from my
Yeah.
memory, Prime, I don't sense of that. I'm also
Mhm.
not 100% sure.
because they
Mhm.
can sell the order book, but are they giving liquidity to the order book?
Right.
I
I
think
think they
that there's
are,
like a
especially for
nuance.
Prime. I think especially for Prime, they are. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
because if
Um,
they can actually act as like a seller, right? They could be a seller and sell you
Yeah.
assets, right?
Hmm.
If they have their own assets to sell, not customers' assets that they're
Right.
I don't really know actually.
unduly.
Is there some legal distinction between the two?
Yeah.
Well,
One is a dealer and one's an agent,
No,
Yeah.
right?
I know,
One's
but like
taking a commission and yeah.
what institution or what entities have that capability of market making?
Well, dealers will technically participate in the ownership of that asset. So a dealer would buy an asset from a market, hold on to it in their own inventory, then sell it back
Actually,
to someone.
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Coinbase would be in mucky waters if they mark
Mhm.
like in terms of like
Wow.
regulation. I don't know, no idea.
Yeah,
So
that's why
Yeah.
I was asking out of pure curiosity because I
Yeah.
can say that, like, for example, Xerox, they certainly have positions involving where they have a lot of great relationships with market makers. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's been money to be exchanged at all. I don't think there is. Here and they probably even have their own firm doing the same thing with Periscope Trading. They
Right.
trade, but the key thing here is right. It's like this is the funds are trading isn't customer funds. This is
No.
Periscope Trading's funds. If they lose it, they lose their money. They're not losing somebody
Yeah.
else's money
Right.
that
So
they're
Right.
like
exploiting.
I
Right.
think
Um,
it's like I think one of the very interesting things that could potentially happen that would make a Coinbase type situation ecosystem go supersonic is like the same way that Goldman Sachs partnered with Apple to create their first consumer product and pipeline of
Right.
funds moving. I think Coinbase will have to do a similar partnership with probably something like Apple or whatever, and
Okay.
figure out how to basically do like crypto payroll, and then and they have their commerce product, right, which is basic payment processing, what BitPay did,
Right.
and all those things to like work in together. It's just a matter of like they're getting like one. These need each pieces. They have all the pieces in place that are making them talk together properly at
Right.
this
Right.
point, right? And it's like they need to innovate out the custodial UI basically and figure out it's like how can this possibly work
Mm.
and do it in a secure way. There's actually a technical
Mhm.
problem to
Mhm.
that, right? So
I hear that.
yeah, on Coinbase, all the assets are pooled, right? They call it
Yep.
what was the name they use? Like it's blanking on me.
They had their own terminology, right?
Oh yeah. The terminology for what we call funds that are in that pool, the normal
Yeah.
custodial, are
Yeah.
yeah, versus the actual custody cold storage product. Where the assets they're in Coinbase's control, but they're taking care of the cold storage.
Right.
So basically, like they doing DeFi things through the main Coinbase product is technically challenging because it requires them co-signing every single operation. So one,
Right.
it's like
Right.
a throughput problem, and two is like a user experience of like normal people are like, what the fuck why is Coinbase charging me like $10 to do this action, right, or whatever. It's like those small problems they're having to deal
Right.
with.
Right.
So I think a large part of it is even to timing. So maybe as like
Right.
the protocol actually scales, like the convergence of CeFi and DeFi becomes nearly instantaneous. And
Right.
then crypto payroll
well,
combined with crypto commerce and Coinbase
so
wallet and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
I want to. So I was just thinking like CeFi and DeFi's convergence. Wouldn't BSC be that?
Basically,
What?
is
Wait,
that
what?
yes?
Yeah, right.
BSC. Yeah. They took
Isn't
the
that
BNB 20 or
convergence
whatever, and
we
yeah.
prescribed it to?
Yeah.
Like
Um.
it's a CeFi network doing DeFi things.
Right.
With pretty gray regulatory grounds, but
Right. I'd kind of love to like go back to like my original thought here because this isn't something I have worked out by any means. And I know in the United States you guys have a pretty different regulatory environment than even what I'm dealing with, where we have more flexibility in some of the types of products we're seeing on the market. But I was thinking generally along the lines of whoever gets the institutional authority to sell or work with governments in the crypto asset class is going to make a shit ton of money. Now, who is that going to be? There's only a few number of players that can be that can be in the space right now that I'm aware of, right? And so I was thinking, you got your well-capitalized Binance US, you got your Coinbase, you got your FTX. It's probably not going to be Binance, right? But
No, I don't think
I
it's going to be any crypto company.
and it might not,
I
right?
seriously don't think it's going to be.
Right,
I think
right.
it's
I
going to
guess
have. Like I feel,
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe I just have a bad idea of what could potentially happen, but I just feel like the government is much more of an old boys club, and they're much more comfortable going towards so, players like Goldman Sachs or whoever the hell, and
Well,
brokering through
yeah.
them. And Goldman deals with Coinbase as a prime broker, custody, whatever the hell, right? I
You're
don't know.
probably
What do you
right.
think?
Like,
What do you think? Yeah.
just one thing to quick add here.
Well, so
Good.
I want to ask is
Hmm.
with obviously some smaller exceptions, do big sovereign banks own custody assets that are not sovereign products?
Do they? Yeah, they custody foreign products.
But
Right.
they're all sovereign assets, are they? Or are there private goods in there as well? Like would a bank
Yeah.
own a security of a company? A central bank.
Oh, a central bank.
No, I
Central
think
banks would operate a little different than
I think
institutional
they
investors.
So
they
when you
only
say
operate
governments
through.
purchase assets,
Yeah, that
who's
is very
purchasing?
broad. I guess I'm thinking
Like,
more
well,
like,
I was thinking you're
yeah.
saying central banks purchasing. That's what
And
I
that
was
could be a
under
good
was.
starting point for the conversation, even just central banks. But yet again, depending on the country, wouldn't necessarily mean governments. It would mean central banks, right? So I guess I could see that getting mixed up in vocabulary. But like, I'm just thinking along the lines of, as soon as we have, say, sovereign wealth and like sovereign wealth funds and like treasury funds that represent nation states buying up these assets,
Oh,
there's
so
going
you're
to
like
be
it's almost like the Norwegian like gas fund
exactly,
or like
exactly. And like we
the
have, for
Saudi.
example, in Canada, there's an organization. It's called like There's okay. Well, basically, all these different exchanges in Canada work differently. I don't know how it is there exactly. So I know it's similar in some regards. But for example, one exchange will just deal with futures and options. One exchange will just deal with selling to institutional clients. One exchange will just deal with emerging companies. And for example, some of these exchanges make a pretty good killing and exist solely off of dealing with government clientele or central banks or whatever, or just handling
But
processing for these organizations. Yeah.
yeah,
So
no,
in the
yeah, I understand what you're
states,
saying. Yeah.
so in the states, you're referring to like I'm thinking of what clients in the states would exist. Are we talking
I'm trying to
like
think. Yeah.
well like municipal like pension funds,
Stuff like that. Stuff like
Yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
like,
like well for
Because
example, just the
only
Social
those
Security
types of
fund
things.
cannot buy non-American sovereign products. Right?
Yeah.
Like they have to only be able to buy like T bonds, I bonds, and all those
right.
things. They can't really go beyond that. Like that's I think something an act of Congress
Right.
would have to change that. Right.
I guess I'm
But-
thinking more like in general, like electronic trading systems that work within like the money markets in the United States that are going to cater towards like government agencies and like if you understand what I mean. Like I'm
Yeah,
thinking
I think
more.
it's seriously like they're just gonna get around
Mhm.
that. I mean, I think that getting around the whole like pension funds buying crypto is just essentially
Mhm.
like them dealing with banks and buying perpetuals in some
What? So
capacity.
if that's the
Like-
case, why wouldn't they just buy like a GDAX product? Like not GDAX, what is it called?
Oh yeah,
the
G-
grayscale, right?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
grayscale?
I
Sure,
don't think
GBTC
yeah,
and all
GBTC,
those.
that's right.
They
yeah.
want that kind of exposure, right? It's
I
a
don't know.
security within their
Yeah.
regulatory concerns, unless they feel there's a
Maybe
counterparty risk.
maybe they want something
Right.
more complex than that, a more complex product that's
think-
a longer time horizon and less volatility, which would require
Yeah.
like a big bank stepping in on derivatives, right?
Doesn't a lot of this just have to do though with like technically reporting? Like whenever a government makes any kind of purchase, or not even just a government, but a large institution, like the underwriting process is like the most important process in that transaction, right? And so at the end of the day, when I'm talking about like, say, I give the example of like Canadian exchanges, and say you have like a CanPX or some exchange that is actually facilitating the trading with these big government-like institutions. I'm thinking like there's gonna be clear winners. I don't know who those winners are in the United States yet. Back to like what we were talking about earlier, I wondered, just thinking about how Coinbase has such a large institutional foothold, if they could have a product that caters to what we're talking about, if you follow what I mean with regard to selling to these governments or central banks or large agencies, that sovereign wealth agencies. But do you follow what I'm saying here?
Yeah,
It's just
I think it.
yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people in crypto. I think a lot of Silicon Valley crypto thinks users matter. I really actually think it's whales matter.
Yeah.
And right, Coinbase does have some of the better American custody products.
Yeah.
right. I think Coinbase custody is a
Yeah,
they charge quite a big share. They charge quite a lot for literally just sitting on your money.
Yeah,
basically.
it's just like the sophistication of what they have in terms of the cold storage, and then their prime brokerage product is like really solid, right? But at the end of the day, it's like they're only working with so much liquidity. So it's not government level liquidity.
Do you think companies, private? I think, I don't know if you guys agree, but I believe private companies would put crypto on their balance sheets before sovereignties would.
Yes. You said private companies would?
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Yeah, like whoever. So their institutional play here would be pretty massive.
So I feel like if you can eat into that market, in some ways, it may just like be the layup for the even bigger fish that comes after them, right?
Right.
And it's and I think it's all like it's like grassroots / mass scale to an extent. Like getting a payroll product plus the whole payment processing product in connection via Coinbase, like makes a lot of sense. Like somehow getting your paycheck processed through Coinbase, and essentially Coinbase becomes your new Marcus Goldman Sachs like bank account, like neobank that everybody else is trying to do. And commerce with businesses accepting crypto, processing through crypto, et cetera. And then, and as the tooling increases for actual custody of crypto, then businesses are more aligned with that, having that on their balance sheet, I think.
Right.
Potentially using internal tooling. Like I think it's a constant continuum, right? We were talking about the metaverse before. We were talking about Twitter, like using potentially crypto products and stuff like that, and protocolizing, and it getting to the point where it's like we don't call it HTTPS websites right? We just call it websites. So that type of, I think you have to get to that type of level before sufficient liquidity for like a government style. Any kind of involvement with the government. I don't know though, to be honest. I really don't know. I'm not super big fan of like a CFTC of the centralized digital currencies and stuff. Like I think the USDC approach is sufficient for now, right?
CBDCs are scary business.
Yeah, I mean USDC seems to do the job. So what's wrong with that type of methods? 1-to-1, lock it up in a bank straight up, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's a long conversation, Russ.
I was gonna say, this is
it could go on forever.
That's a whole thing by itself, but it's just scary to think about the full capability of centralized digital currency. I don't know.
Right, which like so that kind of brings to that. Almost, I'm kind of like pivoting the conversation a tiny bit here.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of folks are scared of like USDC's like blacklist, right?
Right.
If you are a sanctioned thing by the U.S. government, they are a Western abiding institution, and I wonder, I wonder if like the United States government issues USDs and they say these USD is backed in full faith by the government, just like a paper bill would. Would that, by every parity, be a better product than USDC? Because you don't have because the government is more trustworthy than Center. And Center is like a proxy of the dollar, where this is like, no, the government is
Do you mean Circle?
Circle, yeah. Like I wonder is like if the U.S. government decided to issue their own dollar coins. And they're not doing some like bank based, like they're not custodying paper bills and printing these. They're just saying this is just another first class citizen, as a Benjamin dollar bill would be. We're gonna back this as we would back a normal dollar that is printed or in your bank account. We're backing it just the same way. Wouldn't that technically be a better product than a USDC? Where it has 1 degree removed backing of its value, like.
I mean, I guess it maybe depends on like the use case. I'm trying to think this through, right? It's like, okay, most of dollars are digital to begin with anyway, right? It's not like there's a lot of paper cash floating out there, and it's all and they already have like standardized protocols basically for moving it around with like ACH wire, a FedWire system, and
All
Swift.
that.
And
Yeah.
so that's already digital dollars to an extent. So then what would a digital
So
what would be a digital currency then?
would a digital
Yeah.
dollar require there to be digital bonds, government bonds, to also exist?
I think
Which
under
are
the
also
like,
digital.
do they need to
which
come?
are-
Do they both of these have to come together as a pair?
right.
Yeah,
Under
which
how
are,
you're
they're also digital. The only thing is
Right.
that there's no protocol to transfer them. That's the only difference. They're already digital.
Right. So if they were to do it on like an EVM chain,
yeah,
is it like all or nothing? Are they gonna have to issue I bonds, T bills, and issue to the US dollar on the EVM to create an actual sovereign currency, where the Fed actually regulates that currency via their bonds, right?
I don't know.
Hmm.
It's like,
but
I don't know. It seems like there's no utility yet of a digital. Like, I can't really quite see like how would it even work? Like,
right.
you make your own chain, or you're gonna make it EVM, like an EVM coin. Then what's the difference between US? Like, the only
Well,
difference is now.
then it would just be better than the USDC coin, right? Because USDC, you're still trusting a private company now. That you're trusting a private company and also trusting that USD has value. Where
Right.
if I were to own a fully faith-backed central stablecoin, I remove the whole trusting a private company part, which
Exactly.
means it should be a better product. That's
Yeah,
my
you're probably right. Yeah, you're
one,
probably
two,
right.
three here.
I just like don't. Yeah, I guess like they could have very specific like liquidity for that EVM coin that they put out, and it just competes with USDC. I can see that.
Mm-hmm. What you were talking about before, Ash, you were talking about like representative securities though, right? Like how like
Yeah.
cash is like a representation digitally and bonds digitally. And like I
Yeah.
believe statistically, it's actually only something akin to like 2 to 3% of transactions are actually physically managed in cash, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
like
because what's the difference between a wallet, Coinbase, and then Wells Fargo app on my phone? Like fundamentally, there's no difference. Like so.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys I guess like I'm thinking about it, like do you guys have any banks that you're aware of in the US that are actually currently exploring blockchain technology?
There's a few.
Yeah.
Silvergate Bank is one of the OGs. Anchorage Digital, I don't know if they're US based.
Right.
Are have some pretty good institutional offerings. So there is a cropping now that is trying to serve the high net worth companies, individuals that
Mhm.
have a lot of crypto balances, and offering them like more like different debt financing products or custody products or OTC trading desks, such that these whales can facilitate trades or they're like
Right.
there's enough customers now. Like I think that like an Anchorage Digital, a Silvergate Bank will exist that will serve these customers.
Right.
And if say like for example, like MakerDAO is going to be custodying government assets via a digital asset bank based
Right.
in Switzerland or something, somewhere in Europe,
Probably
that has the right
Switzerland.
regulatory grounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think they know their customers are out there now, right? Which I think
Yeah.
can be really interesting. Where an Anchorage Digital is like, hey, we're gonna go to business with maybe say like Chase or whatever, and say, hey, we're willing to kind of act as the middleman and facilitate maybe a purchase from Chase to maybe Maker side, and Maker's like, hey, we want like to purchase from you, Chase, maybe mortgage-backed securities or purchase whatever safe assets they believe they want DAI to be backed with, right? Like there
Right.
could be massive OTC trades between crypto whales and TradFi whales, as both of them wants to hedge against each other's relative worlds, right?
Right.
And that could get really fancy, and that's where I see like the Anchorages, maybe Coinbase, if they have the interest to do so, can sit in the middle and say, all right, let's get the trade through. But to an extent, I feel like long run, I feel like like there's two ways you can probably be successful. You can either be the guy sitting in the middle, bringing people together and
Mhm.
doing the necessary due diligence to counter like and to facilitate such a massive trade and
Yeah.
earning that fee, or you're the guy trading the crypto out, right? You're a hedge firm with that much freaking crypto that institutional traders are knocking at the
Yeah.
door trying to get trying to get it, and you being the hedge firm, you
Yep.
set the prices, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Dealer
and
versus
So
agency, right? One
also,
makes commission, one makes spread, right?
Yeah.
I think one thing that's missing is basically the relationship between the daily spending, so payment processing of like
Mhm.
whether that's e-commerce or retail in person, and the credit card company. I think that relationship, because remember, the credit card companies are essentially are basically funded by bank liquidity. That's what's doing the monthly uh, rollover of funds, right? And so I think it would, like, okay, what would be the most insane thing that could happen is like, what if Apple buys Square and then teams up with Coinbase, and then basically all terminals get like instant, uh, accessibility with tap to pay, um, of moving crypto around, and then crypto could still be USD, right?
Hmm.
Crypto
Can't you
USDC,
do that already?
and now if you have like a credit,
Yeah. To
yes,
a
but via
degree.
the debt
Yeah.
via the debit card, right? You're still going through Visa and Mastercard,
You're right.
and
You're right.
so the thing is, Apple needs to figure out how to cut out Visa and Mastercard, and buying a company like Square via the terminal system is the easiest way to do that, because it's just NFC to NFC. You can remove the idea of Visa or Mastercard via that.
Well, the NFC part only, it's like signing the order, but somebody still has to actually move the money,
Yeah, which would be like
Hmm.
Coinbase. Yeah.
which that's kind of where Visa makes their money.
Yeah.
Is
So it's much easier.
you
Like,
trust that they sign the checks, but at the end of the day, those are the guys making the multi-million-dollar wire transfers between hundreds and hundreds of banks to
yeah.
settle your consumer-facing checks, right?
So like I could
Right.
see like Gemini put out a credit card. So we're already seeing some investigation into the credit qualities of like doing payment processing. And then the problem with businesses would prefer better payment processing at the end of the day. I think like the use case for businesses is like well understood but not complained about enough, right? It's like they don't get finality on their money for 120 days. Like that's kind of ridiculous. Like super weird if you think about it in 2022, right? As a business,
Yeah.
and then and they're also losing what 3% of everything. So and
Isn't
so
that
as
the whole?
maybe
Sorry, go
as
ahead.
companies like keep crypto on their balance sheet and stuff like this, I think it just like makes sense. Like it's just a capital efficiency. Like Visa
Right.
doing finality over 120 days is just not capitally efficient.
Right. Wasn't that the whole purpose in like wasn't I mean, you guys might recall this, and maybe this is just a regional thing for me, but there's this design rolled out called the real-time rail, which is like a payment rail that's real time basically. And I don't believe the real-time rail had anything to do with crypto, but instead kind of just modernized legacy systems to make it more efficient as you're talking about.
Well, to me, it's like depends on like how real does this dollar have to be to you,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
if this dollar has to be in a like in the American sense, like an FDIC insured bank, and you know that this dollar, exactly this dollar, was the same dollar that that person swiped his card with, like at the countertop,
Yeah.
then you're talking like that's the realest get. But then if I was Visa and say that you say again, I don't know. This is me speaking out of my ass here.
hmm
Say you pay an exorbitant fee to get your money a little bit faster. Probably Visa's all the Visa's doing is like, okay, we have a pool of money. We're just going to give you that pool, a little
Okay.
bit of that. So it's not really so. And then they'll Visa themselves will wait the 100 whatever days of settlement,
Right.
and then take the money that they was supposed to be given to you, and they take it themselves,
Right.
and they just give you from their pool the faster change, right? Like how close to metal does this dollar have to exist to you?
Huh.
Again, I don't really, frankly,
Yeah.
know too much about this space to even make good commentary.
Wouldn't those be like two
Yeah, but see
totally
the problem.
different?
The thing is that again, Visa's operating independently, such that their network of payouts and pay-ins is they're the most fractured, unlike crypto or even the way Cash App or any of these things work, right? It's like Visa, even if like so they may have very close business with like So they still need to do transfers out, ACH, SWIFT, wire transfers out. That is inefficient. That's ultimately the bottleneck, in my opinion. Is like the good innovation could happen is where it's just account to account transfers. Like Coinbase is doing payment processing for both the business and customer side. Then it's just
Mhm.
account to account transfer.
Well,
But the
so if
question
I
also is
was-
like, why didn't Square do this? Why didn't Cash App and Square focus
So,
on the
well,
integration of these?
if I
Does-
were
I
to
think it just,
stay
there
in
wasn't
the Visa
demand.
network, if I were to stay in the Visa network,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
I don't
though.
see
If
how
there's no
staying in the
network
Visa network is
Yeah.
not is any different than staying in the USDC network.
because there's no.
Because if I stay,
no, it
the
is the
moment I have to
same,
leave
yeah.
the USDC network, you're going back to the old rails.
Right.
Or
Yeah,
that,
so
wouldn't
it-
that be the same case with Visa, going back to the same rails? You're just.
I get my
am I
point was
understanding
more.
this?
My point basically is that you just don't have an account with Visa. No company, like no, the businesses don't really have an accounts with Visa. Visa just has very large accounts with the banks, and they just do transfers back and forth. But as a merchant, you don't have an account with Visa. You don't have an account with American Express, whereas in they're doing account to account transfers, right? So if I had an account with American Express, and then the store that I buy goods has an account with American Express, then you can do an immediate account to account transfer, not even go through Visa, do that entire
Well,
transaction
there
very
is a
efficiently.
construct of an account. I'm just trying to like understand this.
Yeah, which is
Right,
the
like
card,
if I were to,
right? The
if I
card,
by
yeah.
the principles of me being able to send you money, there has to be a some mental model of an account.
Yeah, but
But
so when I swipe my card,
but you're
yeah,
saying
so that
it lives in
card,
only Visa's world.
yeah, so my card is my account with American Express, right? But the business, when I swipe my card, American Express has no visibility into the financial status of the entity that I just swipe my card with. It's just a Visa transaction or American Express transaction.
Wait,
You see what I'm saying?
You're-
they?
There's firewalls. Like Visa wouldn't have access to see into his account. They would just process
No,
the transaction.
Yeah, I don't mean firewalls. I mean like they don't know that like the financial status of the company that you just swipe at.
Sure. Yeah.
They just know how
Well,
many they
wouldn't
just process a
you- wouldn't-
transaction.
Well, they don't let it. It's not a public system, right?
Yeah,
They only
what
let
I
clients that they have due diligence on, which would imply that they know something about the clients, right?
yeah,
They
I guess like
definitely
like
Yeah.
all I'm okay. So basically, this is the way the best way to describe it. The merchant basically is using a processor like Square. Square processes transactions for Visa, American Express, Mastercard. Now, Square is basically acting as an intermediary between the merchant and Visa, Mastercard, and American Express. So those three companies, those credit card processors, really have no insight into the merchant in any true capacity. They have a unique identifier to create the transaction, and that's it.
Would
Right? They don't know
wouldn't
the account
Visa
status.
be, since Visa has Square right in the balls, I guess, right, hands right on the balls, metaphorically, wouldn't they say if you want to use us, Square, you have to give us a lot of your data, like, right?
I
Like, wouldn't
don't think merchant data is
because
passed.
I think Visa has the power to do that, right?
They do have the power, but I think the level of insight they have into the merchant is
So
minimal.
why
is
wouldn't they
absolute.
do that? Visa knowing Visa, they're boy, why wouldn't they do that, right? Like, why wouldn't?
And then
they ask
another
for it? 'Cause
question is
Square's
Does quick question for you both. Does Square hold assets on its balance sheet, or is it just a broker?
well, maybe for the Square Cash App, I don't know.
for the
Because
Cash App, yeah.
there is a big difference. Like if Visa's holding assets now, I don't know if they do. You guys would know better than me. But if Visa holds these assets,
They
right?
they do.
Okay, and if Square does not, those are fundamentally two different businesses. Straight up, one's an
Yeah.
investment dealer, one is acting as an agent making fees as commission. And
Exactly.
in terms of regulation, just completely different. So that
So-
immediately, I would think that's the barrier, wouldn't
The
it
biggest interesting thing about Visa, by every definition, is not a bank.
be? Hmm.
They use banks to custody assets that they own.
Right.
Amex, for example, is a bank.
Yes.
They have to follow the regulatory whatever things that is the bank. So they
Mm-hmm.
but the thing is, implied in this is whatever way you legally structure yourself, a credit card network, they actually own the funds, but they put a layer on top of that,
Yeah.
which
Mm.
I think what you're talking about to me sounds a lot like Venmo in some ways.
It's like imagine if the merchant and the user both use Venmo, then it would just be a slick account to account transfer with pretty good finality, right? Compared to the
Which I think
runaround.
like small, like I've definitely had street side
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
street
no.
meat.
So we see that. So we see that,
Sold
right? It's
with,
like,
all right,
yeah,
Venmo.
we see that in Venmo. We see that with Cash App. And then the question
Mhm.
is, how come we never saw a very strong integration between Square's merchant product and Cash App? Interesting question. I think the
Did
obvious
they?
answer to that,
I
there's no strong
Interesting.
integration. The obvious answer to that is because Square has their balls are in the grip of the credit card processors, and so they cannot overcome
Mm.
the idea of a debit card tap to pay. They have to do it that way. There's no other way. And so I think the innovation of of a combination of three things of like an Apple the resources of an Apple, the processing merchant power, the merchant saturation that Square has. I think it's pretty good, right? Merchant
Mhm.
saturation for Square, and then the crypto bank neobankness of Coinbase is like an interesting like. Do you see where I'm getting
well,
at? Basically, you're doing the Venmo thing. You're
Mhm.
also giving a very good like sales pitch to the businesses to why you would want to use something like Coinbase, so you can accept more types of assets and different types of positions, and also yourself hold crypto on the balance sheet if you're a business, and you can overcome a credit
so
card processor with this type of perfect integration between Apple's and
right, well,
yeah.
that's where like. So one is I'd love for that to be the case in the future, where
Of
businesses are
course.
like, I love crypto to be held like
That'd
that.
be a given.
I don't think right now, or maybe where you could go
Well, this
to
is my
every company,
BitPay
right?
brain coming out. This is my BitPay brain coming out.
Right.
Bit pay
Um,
brain.
I will say that from my very brief tenure at Visa, there's a reason why they're king at this, and it's in part
Mhm.
because
Mafia.
it's yeah that and like they have a damn powerful, very very wide network where a lot of places access points are. They have a lot of
Mhm.
doors into the Visa system.
Mhm.
Two, relatively speaking, that compared to Venmo, it is still a much more secure, safe network. What do I mean by this? Like Visa's transactions actually are like their own like internet lines. Like their
Mhm.
data centers do not touch the internet. They literally just proprietary laid their own freaking wires across the world, effectively
Mhm.
linking them together. So by
That
that
makes sense. Yeah.
definition, like a Venmo product which has to use internet rails to facilitate settlement, they are fundamentally a little less safe
Hmm.
than what Visa has poured a gazillion bazillion dollars to do. Now, Venmo also, as I understand it, a big part of their business is the fact that you put money into their bank account
Mhm.
and they do pretty much a fractional reserve styled push some of the money into some amount of maybe investment rails where they earn some amount of yield. So that's how they pay for their feeless settlement, right? Or how that company keeps solvent, right? Um, where, as far as I see it, Visa doesn't do that. Visa
Hmm.
just takes their 3% and call it a day, right?
Wouldn't
So
Well, I
like
mean,
wouldn't
it's
that make a lot of sense?
you
Sorry, I
just
just
try
want
to
to
think
add here.
about. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I was thinking, like, for example, the way I deal with Visa in my businesses every day isn't directly. It's through Moneris or whatever other
right,
payment processor I use, right? And so, like, that's the big difference. Like, you're dealing with Venmo directly, where most of us, I don't even know if there is a retail way for us to deal with Visa
there
directly,
really isn't.
right?
No, yeah,
And so, like, again, two completely different products. Wouldn't you
right.
think? Yeah. Um.
Well, I think they're different and they have different risk parameters.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of undeniable to say that Visa is pretty dang rigorous about their safety.
Indeed. Yeah.
That you can't beat. But then the cons is it's a few degrees removed from the reality, and those guys are monopolists, and
Mm.
they
Mhm.
will have your balls in their iron grip
Yeah,
and figure out how to get every penny they can, right?
Mhm.
Where Venmo plays a trickier game, but then Venmo has a risk of a bank run, right? Where if they mismanage their fractional reserve, don't think they're FDIC insured,
Mm.
um, you may not get your funds, right?
Right.
yeah,
Which is a non-zero chance, but
yeah.
we're
I mean,
talking
so
like a more non-zero chance than Visa's non-zero chance, which
like, what
Right.
what is the most like the like one? like if every user, and if not even a normal person, like a merchant terminal, if every merchant terminal ran a node in an efficient manner and could verify a new block, like very efficiently, with like the whole ZK snark stuff they're talking about. I mean, that sounds like actual decentralization, right? So, and it would overcome all the problems of like what you mentioned about like Visa transaction security and stuff like that.
Well, would it?
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
because Visa has literally the physical benefit of a closed system, right?
They're
Like,
almost housed. Yeah.
right? Like, I'm not saying like I genuinely don't like. I'm not here to measure security designs.
Hmm.
To be fair,
Oh.
like, look, it's like I'm saying this as like I worked at Visa for like 3-4 months, and not that I like the place, but I came to respect it.
Yeah.
Came to respect the monster it is.
Right.
Like I want to ask a question here is
hmm
if you were to run a business, at what point would you not be comfortable using Venmo to facilitate day-to-day transactions? Like if you're saying you have $100 million going in and out of your business a month, would you use Venmo?
No.
No.
So
No,
10
I
million?
wouldn't. That's too.
Hmm?
I
Not
wouldn't
because
even use.
they're
No.
not marketed for that type of thing, right? So like at a certain point,
Right.
I would
So
want to do
that's
things
where I
custodial.
think you would have to
Yeah.
ask that for every other network, right? If Apple facilitates a network.
Yeah. Good question.
So
Good-
that's what I'm
point
saying.
Good
Like
thought.
are
Yeah.
you
whatever facilitation that they do, it has to be edging towards like allowing making it much more easy to transition to non-custodial type situation, like merchants keeping funds non-custodially in some capacity, whether that's like Coinbase custody or they're doing it themselves and like running a node and verifying transactions and shit like that efficiently.
But so with that, if I was a sales guy coming to a potential merchant saying, "Hey, use us," I don't think you can sell them on like, "Oh, you run your own nodes, your own private keys."
Yeah. You
Like
can't.
they
You
care
can't.
about is
Not
this
right
safe for
now.
me
Yeah.
to move $50 million a month, right? If it's not
Right.
safe, if I don't feel safe, then hell for
Then
it. I'm going to use a
Yeah,
network that makes me feel safe,
which
like
is
that,
like
right?
this is exactly why I think the first step is like the kind of triangle incest relationship between a Coinbase, Apple, Square type situations. Like get the payment processing terminal thing working with crypto, get the device access to all the people, right? Mass device access, and like
Well,
if you can integrate with businesses really well, then you can do payroll and the POS really
so
well,
here's a
right?
dumb question then again.
Yeah.
How much money would you trust Apple to
And,
send you
and it's not
in a month?
so Coinbase custody. So
Right.
the way Coinbase custody works is non-custodial, right? Is non-custodial in the way that you have to have
Well,
your
how is it
UV key
non-custodial?
because you have to have your UV key to actually decode anything.
You wait, so wait, that's so oxymoronic in my head. Okay, slow down.
Yeah, so like they have so Coinbase. That's what I'm saying. Well, Coinbase custody is a nice in between. Basically, it's like it's custody, yeah, but it's not Coinbase.com. Like it's like there's a very rigorous
Well,
security
they don't
design.
pool your assets first, right? Those guys don't pool your
No,
assets.
they don't pull your assets. No, they
That's
don't pull
one
your
big benefit. That's already one big good thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But
And they
your
don't
private
reuse
key
keys.
is still there, is still within their hands
But they can't unlock it. They can't
because
pull
you
those
own
funds.
a YubiKey.
Yes. They can't actually touch those funds. They physically can't. In fact, if your YubiKey is destroyed and the Sage's YubiKey is destroyed, those funds are gone. Yeah.
And who's the second person?
Sage is basically this well, I'm just I don't know why my mind's blanking. It's the Coinbase employee who signed the transaction.
So Coinbase still has a key.
Yes. They have half the key.
Okay.
Half a key. Wait, that just means
You're using your UV key to complete it. Yeah.
So it's almost like a
fractionalized cryptography.
It's
We're going to give you
literally
6 of your
multi-sig.
12 seeds.
So okay, so
Yeah.
in that case, what are you paying them for?
It's a good
To
question.
manage the cold storage.
Because why can't you just do this with like a Gnosis?
I
Right?
guess,
Like, what are you paying their 45 bips for? Right? Like,
so like
this
because
is the
I think
question.
just I think they have an additional mechanism that like if you lose your UV key, they have some kind of like recovery process. But basically, what they do is like whenever you make a transaction, they FaceTime you and verify. They do like all this shit basically.
So it's like a very
Um,
fancy multi signature partner in your
yeah,
Gnosis.
exactly. Yeah.
Huh.
And they just have like a
Is
very
there
complicated.
insurance? Is there insurance on
Yeah,
custody funds? Like if you lose
I
them in some weird
believe.
way, like
Yeah, I believe there's insurance on it, and on top of that, there's also a pretty sophisticated design for how the cold storage works. So it's not like just a normal multi-sig wallet, because the way they are withdrawing when they need to withdraw funds from cold storage, right? They have to have a design for how that's actually air gapped in like a meaningful way and whatnot. And so what is
but
actually
then
being signed,
well,
what's being
Hmm.
decrypted.
if it's a YubiKey design, isn't the YubiKey still the weakest point of the whole design?
Probably.
Right.
Yes,
So
yes, yeah,
why would it matter if the other things are harder? Right. If you
yeah. I think
compromise a
that
YubiKey, you're still screwed.
because they
Yeah.
still FaceTime you, they FaceTime you for every transaction
So it's a
before sign,
KYC Gnosis, is what I'm
basically.
hearing.
It's a
Yeah,
lot of
right.
work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
I was just curious to know.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, that's why it's only for really like large clientele, like not normal
Right.
DeFi whales, right? You see what I'm saying?
right.
Right. Which I
I'd
think
love
has a
to.
point.
That was not their not target market. They wanted that, and they would go full DeFi tilt and building out every single tooling possible into that product. But it's literally
Right.
just for large buys. Yeah.
Do you guys want to touch on Jack's new release of Zion V2? You know, like since we're talking about payments and security, just for some context to our listeners, Jack, you know, associated with Twitter, created a digital identity platform. He basically created a relaying open source relay service that can communicate, and he created on top of that a payment rail that exists on the Lightning Network. It's called Zion. I don't believe it's live. He just announced it on his quote unquote Web 5 endeavor. I think just yesterday or the day before. But this tool it seems to be more like it has a digital identity storage component, so you can store your messages, you can store your data associated with your digital identity.
This is stored on the blockchain, the
They have
Bitcoin Lightning Network.
nodes. You can create digital identity nodes. I don't exactly know how this is done. So I would love to just send you this article if you're curious and you could look into it. But
I saw a little bit of it today, but I didn't read the whole thing.
it's interesting. I mean, like part of me, okay, I'll just kind of break down my concern with you guys and see what you guys think about this. The whole premise of this digital identity is built on a 12-word seed. And personally, I think we need to move past the 12-word seed standard. And I'm aware of other standards being built that don't require you to manage a 12-word seed, risking somebody, in this case, completely
Dude,
stealing your
this is like
freaking identity, you
this
know?
is literally like Urbit. This is just like Urbit, to be honest.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
just
Oh fuck! You guys, I don't know. Do you guys have heard of the project called Status? Status something.
yeah, I
sounds
remember
familiar.
Status.
Yeah.
2017, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. That shit was cool though. That was really well designed at the
Yeah,
time.
it was like my main wallet for a while before. it
Yeah.
got bad.
Really?
Yeah.
But yeah, have you guys looked into, you know, this? Like, I can see in the blog I even sent you guys, it says that, you know, the service Zion will be P2P payments between creators and fans at first. So I don't know how they're planning to work that in.
So it's like it sounds like Lens Protocol.
It's kind of like Lens Protocol, yeah.
um,
More contingent though on this DID service that the real innovation in this product seems to just be their what are they calling it here? Their decentralized web node, which is just like a DID
so
storage
it's like
system.
is this like, oh, this is my plot of storage
Yeah,
related to me,
yeah,
which
and
like mini rant. My current philosophy with decentralized storage is, with the right cryptography, you can get the right privacy constructs. If
Right.
it's this kind of like DID style design, you can do that. I think the storage that you actually like, the physical storage of it, largely is agnostic to how decentralized or centralized it is.
right,
Because I think, for example, like IPFS is not a storage network; it's a resolution system. We
right,
resolve files to a place, be
Yep.
it that stored on Arweave, is that stored somewhere else? God knows, right? Like,
right, right.
so there's almost like a separation of concerns to me when somebody tells me it's just centralized storage, private storage. It's like, are you referring to a
Hmm.
cryptographically strong way to do that?
I should
and
add.
you're putting it on Arweave, or are you also creating a network that is storing that data? Because I find that
Yeah.
to be like, why are you doing more work? Like Arweave's fine, SIA's fine, but I think the hard work is actually building the cryptographically strong DID, but who
Right.
actually stores it?
Right. I want to add that it does say here that their decentralized web nodes are a mesh-like data store construction that enable an entity to operate multiple nodes that sync at the same time across one another. It says here, enabling the owning entity to secure, manage, and transact data without the reliance on a location or provider-specific infrastructure interfaces or mechanisms. So it looks like that data is almost being fractionalized across the networks that this person, I don't know how this works really in terms of interactions, but yeah.
this website looks like Facebook's Libra when it came out.
Yes.
It looks like such a scrap together website with mock-ups.
Right. Do you guys have any faith in, like, okay, so when I think about this, like this whole idea is like kind of assuming that people are going to want to make their digital identity on Bitcoin, isn't it? Because it's connected to the Lightning Rail. And so do you guys think that what are you guys' thoughts on this product? Like, do you guys see this having a wide adoption? Do you guys see this as anything particularly innovative?
Lightning Network, isn't that thing like just always dead still?
Pretty much. Ethereum does more than Lightning in terms of transactions, but
I mean, those kind of state channel based scaling solutions never quite, I think, worked in crypto's history. I think Lightning Network being the key example of it. Like there was one of those, because way back in like 2018 and ETH, there was a lot of research being done on state channels. Being that's what Lightning Network is, right?
Right.
There's a lot of research being done, and I feel like at the end of it all, the conclusion was this is a dead end when it comes to scaling.
Right.
That it's much more preferable to do like L2s, rollups, ZK based work, right? And so,
or increase
because it's so fragmented, it's so dang fragmented,
or that,
right? So I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it's like I feel that whatever your identity social graph has to be, whatever it is, has to be on an EVM compatible construction. I don't care if it's on the mainnet. It just probably should be EVM compatible, because that just gives you the freedom of choosing which environment you want to run it on.
I agree.
If you don't do an EVM standard, then you're just going to kind of like shoot yourself in the hole. Right? You can't just freely move from Polygon to Optimism to whatever, right? Technologically speaking. Where, if you have to create your own construction of a computational model around your social graph, you're just kind of like stuck to where you are, right? You're backed into that corner. And that this doesn't really sound like sound business strategy, but then if you have a filthy amount of money that you can blow to make that maybe work, maybe Jack has that.
Maybe.
But then you're kind of playing the whole like Solana Aptos game where you're like hoping that you have enough money to pay your way to killing EVM.
Get through the headwinds, get to the other side. Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like if status didn't work and all these other things didn't work, I've hard time feeling like a Bitcoin variant would make it. It doesn't feel like a 10x better solution.
Right.
That's my current feeling about it.
Right. Really, it just feels like the only loud voices I know that are even rallying around Lightning are Jack and Michael Saylor, right? So I feel like this has almost like a use case for the people who follow them.
Ask,
yeah.
Ash, does Lightning Network work with Cash, Bitcoin Cash? Is there a variant of that for Cash?
Yeah, like you can put Lightning Network on BCH. Like Lightning Network works better on BCH, to be honest. Like Lightning Network works better if the transaction fees on L1 are cheaper, of course, right?
Okay.
And so it would actually work. It would work better on BCH. But I mean, there's a lot of weird problems with Bitcoin. I don't know what exactly. Like, it sounds like they just want to use the cryptographic properties of like signing messages to like authenticate into websites and shit. and like
Mhm.
store data. That it sounds like basically that's what they're doing. Now, like
Basically, yeah.
fundamentally, there's no difference between that and then whatever the stuff that's already happening in Web3. So I don't really know what they're calling it, like
Web 5.
Web 5. You know, I think
When
they're just
did we
adding
skip
the
4?
yeah. I think
I
like
almost feel yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, like I mean, yeah, just I think the cool stuff that's being developed in Ethereum, especially right now with the account extraction and then this like ZK thingy, um, like really kills a lot of the problems that Bitcoin maxis had with Ethereum. If they
Mhm.
can do it, if they can pull it off, you know. Um, but I don't know what they're trying to go for. Like, are they saying that like Bitcoin's more decentralized? Like that's why we prefer this, and that's why we prefer Lightning Network. But at the end of the day, Lightning Network is just going to be even more centralized than anything we've seen on like Polygon.
100%.
It's going to be like a
Mhm.
BSC basically, right? And in fact, it
Right.
may be so gross where like node operators start like gatekeeping or like charging weird fees for like certain. It's even worse than MEV. You know, it's even worse than
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't
So
it like like 8 main entities that have like the real authority over this entire network? Like 8, like basically
The
groups of
Lightning Network?
engineers. Yeah, like if I'm not mistaken, like I believe Elon Musk and Michael Saylor in like 2020 called like some sort of consortium together where they got a whole bunch of entities, organizations, and engineers together who had a care to work on the Bitcoin network. And if I understand today, it's only like 8 official entities that have a real say on the development of the Lightning Network. Now, could be speaking out of my ass, mind you, right? So,
yeah.
but
I mean,
I,
part of it's
I
like going back to the conversation of why did the fork even happen in the first place? Because it's like
mhm.
I think the argument was very much like this Lightning Network's going to solve everything. So we don't need to make any changes to like the iterative changes to the VM or anything like that, or add opcodes or increase block size. Like we don't need to do any of that. We got like what's his name, Adam Beck or whatever the hell his name is. Like he had the Lightning Liquid Network, I think it was called Liquid, which is basically
That's
Lightning.
familiar.
Yeah, and I think he was spearheading that because he saw that as the new Visa. He saw that as basically a Visa. What Lightning Network would basically just be a Visa, right, of some sort. That they're
If
operating
it
on
was
these large
scale,
scale.
right?
Basically,
Yeah, yeah. And so I think he saw it that way. And he saw like, oh, they started convincing themselves, looking for a business opportunity. Oh, Bitcoin's a settlement network like ACH or FedWire. Let's be the Visa by making this liquid Lightning Network thingy. Like they were convincing themselves, right?
I hear you. Yeah.
I mean,
Good
at the end
insight.
of the day, it's like there's no technical argument for why should be 1 megabyte block size, right? And then and who knows what would happen? Would have happened with Bitcoin if it went up all the way to like let's say 1 gig block sizes, and then people start considering it's like, oh, let's start adding new opcodes to the VM, and then like let's see what we can unlock. Like what kind of weird shit can we do with Bitcoin script? Like we would have been in a different world if that fork didn't happen. And it wouldn't have detracted at all from Ethereum. It would have just been a separate avenue of development. It would have just unlocked another door for Bitcoin. You know, but they decided not to go through that. That's on like core Bitcoin thing. I think like a lot of this is like self-convincing of like I liked Bitcoin, and it's like and Ethereum's out innovating us. Like, let's come up with like an idea on Bitcoin that's gonna work.
We got to
right?
catch up.
Yeah, right. It's like you're convincing yourself, like, but you have to look at like reality
Jeez.
at some point, right?
You're totally right. Like it does feel a little bit silly to be trying to build out Bitcoin as an app chain almost. You know what I mean? It doesn't even make sense at this point. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
it
I
almost
think there's
feels
still
like a big meme. Yeah,
like it's
go ahead.
still like a lot of room for them to like revisit the idea of block sizes and like think about it's like what does it mean to achieve pre-consensus in a 10-minute window? So what does that even look like? Like that's a more interesting problem than Lightning Network. You know, it's like what do we do in a 10-minute interval? Like let's really think about that. You know, like that's an interesting problem space. Like not fucking Lightning Network, dude. Like Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, jeez. Do you guys use Lightning for anything? Probably not.
Never touched it.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever actually submitted a Bitcoin transaction in my life. Like,
yeah,
really.
I may have to settle something between Binance to somewhere else when I held a little bit then, but if I did it, it's probably would have been WBTC if I was moving Bitcoin. Yeah. But like to be fair, WBTC it's like custodied by like it's like literally a large Gnosis multisig with like 20 signers on it.
Right.
So it's not that infinitely safer. It is still a fairly centralized thing, and like half the companies that can sign the multi-sig is like dead by now. Like most of these
Yeah,
companies
that's.
do not exist at this point or have been acquired. So
Did you guys use what was it called? Ren BTC ever? You guys know
No,
Ren?
Well, I know of
I know
it.
what
Yeah.
it is, but I never
Yeah.
used it. No.
I mean, Ren was pretty cool when it came out. Now it seems like it's not too special today, but when it came
I know
out,
there's
Ren was sick.
there's some attack people did to like basically get
Yeah.
they drained and they used Rencoin as one of the main like gateways to
Right.
get money out. So I thought that was pretty interesting, being that cross chain thing or whatever. But I mean, actually, us talking about Bitcoin is just funny because I'm at a dead end. It's like I don't even know really what's going to happen with Bitcoin. It's like at this point, it's like I don't even think about it. You know?
Yeah. I couldn't say either. I don't know if anyone could say. I think Jack's trying to say what's happening with Bitcoin, and we're not convinced. I mean, even I saw this line here that I highlighted. It's like building new software on new primitives, and he highlights in italics, right? For products that have not existed before is exponentially harder. And I'm thinking like none of that sounds true. And and I mean, I'm sure it's hard to take something that doesn't work and make it work instead of building something new from the ground up. Not that it doesn't work, but it has its place, right? Anyways,
like the thing with like, oh God, you know, this is me being an ETH maxi, right? So it's like you're already starting on the wrong freaking foot, like to on the wrong freaking place to create a computational model around the Bitcoin system, right? Like it's a UTXO based model. It doesn't really quite have the standards of opcos. It doesn't have a community that is conducive of the necessitated changes to support a rapidly evolving application layer. Like I think Ethereum needs its hard forks for it to have continued competitiveness, relatively speaking, within its application with its smart contracts. Like the London hard fork was a really big deal to our usability of it. I think the issuance now dropping to like 0.008% every a year of ETH is like like you kind of need all these stuff, right? And I think now we're even at a point where, on the basis of the modern EVM, we're already seeing like kind of the golden age of decentralized computational models kind of occur, which I think like Bitcoin is even just trying to chase the EVM right now.
Yeah.
Where we're seeing optimistic designs, we're seeing zero knowledge designs, we're seeing stuff
I think
like
his world perspective is probably highly modified by Twitter. To be honest, it's like more so than like a normal VC who already exists in crypto Twitter land, right? It's like I think he's like highly skewed towards any type of data he's consuming directly from Twitter. And like I think the easy example when you think about it is like, all right, who are the two most powerful people like at the start of like the Bitcoin fork wars, right? Like it's really Jihan, who's like the co-founder of Bitmain, the largest mining entity. And they also sell miners. I don't know if they're still kicking it after China stuff, but he was a massive Bitcoin Cash supporter, and he actively went to participated in the hash wars. And I think like because there's no active voice on Twitter, it was so easy for Jack just to skew towards maximalism rather than going back to like foundation. He's a techie, right? He's just like everybody else in this space at the end of the day. I think it's just he unfortunately, because of his status, lives in a bubble of verified Twitter handles giving him info, which is it's a tough way to live.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm curious to see, if Jack actually ends up having a current role in Twitter. Like it does seem like him and Elon have a bit of a tie. And I've heard them speak, and maybe you guys remember this earlier in the year. Elon and Jack actually did a forum, and they actually spoke about the future of Web3. And it wasn't a very long conversation, but it did give me this thought to Elon having more of an openness to Jack's ideas. And so I am curious to see if this starts getting, if that deeply ingrained belief system that you were talking about that has been formed by Twitter actually comes back around and impacts it. And if this
Bitcoin NFTs,
wouldn't that be something? Yeah, I mean, yeah. But anyways, it's interesting to think about the
Yeah.
future of
I
the
mean,
space.
he's a really interesting founder, right? He's the
Yeah,
only social media founder who went on to make other stuff in an Elon Musk style, right? He made
right.
like Square, which is by itself like a pretty incredible feat to do Twitter and then immediately make Square. It's like, whoa, dude, pretty
Yeah,
insane,
yeah,
right?
for sure.
He's like pretty much the only other guy I can think of who's done something like that. So,
Hmm.
I mean, what he's accomplished is incredible, but at the same time, it's like he's almost blue balled by the fact that he is involved with Twitter to an extent.
Hmm.
And there's a like that is such a deep like thing by itself. That's like its own conversation, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, he definitely is an interesting character, though, and you're right. Like, there aren't a lot of examples out there who have
Right.
gone on to have like the same kind of serial successes that he's seeing, right? In two different industries, for that matter.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, and kind of like getting back to what we were talking about earlier. I hope, if anything, when it comes to Twitter and like Elon's ownership, I'd love to see Jack almost have like an epic comeback. Like, it would be sick because in the
Yeah. It
public
would be
eye,
sick. It would be
right?
sick. Yeah.
He doesn't really have the greatest perception in the public eye. This could be like his Steve Jobs moment if Elon allows him the space. Elon could make him CEO again, guys. Like, you know what I
That would be
mean?
great. That would be great.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so curious to see how this plays out.
But I think his like yeah, it's like even the Bitcoin maxi of Steven, CEO of BitPay, even
Mhm.
he who is super bought into like Bitcoin like maximalism was like
Yeah.
Jack's a little more maxi than I think he should be. Like even he said that, and I was like, damn, dude, okay.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, right on, guys. Is there anything you wanted to touch on before we wrap up here?
No, all good.
No, I think it was a good conversation. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, to all you guys who tuned in today, we sure appreciate it. You can find us on Twitter, PRRF Beauty, Proof Beauty. Be sure to give us a follow and stay tuned with the conversation. We're always looking to talk about the up and coming things in the space, and also trying to keep it relevant to the way the studio operates and the spirit of it. But
Mhm.
with that, we hope you guys all have a fantastic weekend.